February 20th, 2024. Miami. The clock ticks, 11:42 p.m. A concierge walks down a quiet hallway, but the air is thick with something wrong. A door creaks open and his heart stops. Inside the penthouse, Samantha Ellis, dismembered, bloody and cold, has been shoved into the refrigerator. No struggle, no sign of a fight, just chilling precision. In the lobby, a bloodied woman stumbles forward, her hands shaking. She whispers, "He tried to hurt me." Her voice cracks, a ghost of terror. The camera follows her eyes, wide, panic-stricken, as she barely holds on to her sanity. And then, Sheikh Abdulbashir Fahad, a billionaire mogul with ties across continents, steps into the scene. Calm, collected, untouched. The man who has everything. His hands don't tremble. His voice doesn't break. He claims it's an accident, self-defense. But everything about him screams control, and that raises more questions than answers. A movie night gone wrong, and a woman's life ends in a cold, calculated murder. But did she die at his hands? What really happened that night? This isn't just a crime. It's the beginning of something much, much bigger. Welcome back to True Case HQ, where we revealed and exposed the uncovered case that will give you edge about how crimes are committed. Please take a second to hit subscribe, and turn on the notification ring so you can never miss a new case. Let's move into it. As the city hums with life, a towering figure stands at the center of global wealth and power. Sheikh Abdulbashir Fahad, 55 years old, a real estate mogul, exudes the image of a man who has everything. His name commands respect in boardrooms from Dubai to New York, and his empire stretches across continents. From sleek high-rises to luxurious resorts, his portfolio speaks volumes. Multi-billion-dollar projects that dominate skylines and redefine luxury living. Publicly, Abdulbashir is the face of success, but behind his carefully crafted image lies a man whose thirst for control runs deep. At countless business summits and charity galas, Sheikh Abdulbashir is the star. His speeches are eloquent, always discussing sustainability, innovation, and philanthropy, topics that make him a respected figure in global circles. He is often seen shaking hands with world leaders, sitting at the same tables as celebrities and politicians, his presence commanding the room. His carefully curated public persona is that of a visionary, a man who can balance business with benevolence. But even as his name becomes synonymous with opulence and influence, there's an underlying tension in the air, a whisper about the man who controls everything around him, his company, his wealth, and even the people closest to him. Abdulbashir's life, in the eyes of the public, is nothing short of perfect. He is married to Layla Fahad, a woman of grace and poise who matches his stature in every way. Together they have 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, each one molded in the image of success. The family is always seen together, whether at charity events, vacations, or public outings. The photographs of them, smiling in perfect harmony, are plastered across magazines and social media, reinforcing the image of the ideal family. Layla, with her elegance and calm demeanor, is often described as the perfect wife. She is the pillar of the family, the one who keeps the household running smoothly while her husband plays the role of a powerful businessman. Their family, seemingly flawless, is admired by those who only see the surface. Their immaculate private jets, luxury cars, and endless vacations seem to promise an idyllic life. They are the power couple of Dubai, the image everyone aspires to. But there's something that no one sees, something hidden in the shadows. Beneath the surface, Abdulbashir harbors a deep, unsettling need for control. He's not just a businessman, he's a man who commands absolute power over everything in his life, including his relationships. And when those relationships begin to slip out of his grasp, something dark happens. Behind closed doors, Abdul is not the calm, charismatic leader he portrays. He is a man who manipulates, isolates, and controls. His previous relationships with women have ended in mysterious and often tragic ways, each woman a mere pawn in his carefully calculated game. There are whispers among his inner circle about the women who have disappeared from his life, with little explanation. Rumors swirl, but no one dares ask questions. His wealth shields him, giving him the ability to silence those who get too close to his darkest secrets. Women who have come and gone from his life have often vanished without a trace, their stories twisted into something unrecognizable. In the few instances where investigations are launched, they are quickly dismissed as if power and money can erase any trace of wrongdoing. A former lover once claimed that Abdul Bashir's behavior was not just controlling, it was psychotic, a need for domination that bled into every part of his life. Yet the story never made it past the tabloid rumors. In his most recent relationship, that of his affair with Samantha Ellis, Abdul Bashir's pattern of control becomes painfully obvious. Samantha, an ambitious event planner from New York, enters his world, drawn in by his charm and the promises of a life beyond her wildest dreams. But what she doesn't know is that she is about to become another chapter in the tragic story of women who fall into Abdul Bashir's orbit. He isolates her, pulls her away from her family and friends, and makes her believe that the luxury and gifts he showers on her are marks of affection, when in reality they are tools of manipulation. Abdul Bashir's ability to play the part of the perfect family man while keeping his darker, more controlling side hidden is key to his power. He is a master of manipulation and deception, always 2 steps ahead, making sure nothing ever slips. But there is one thing that even he can't control: the eventual unraveling of the lies he has built his empire on. Now, as the investigation into Samantha murder begins to unfold, Detective Rachel Hayes, a seasoned investigator, starts to piece together Sheikh Abdul's true nature. What she uncovers goes far beyond the perfect family facade. The deeper she digs, the more chilling the reality becomes. Abdul Bashir Fahad isn't just a man of wealth and influence. He is a man whose power comes at the cost of others' lives. With each new revelation, the tension grows. Samantha's tragic death is only the beginning of what will become a tangled web of lies, power, and a dark obsession for control that no one, not even the powerful sheikh himself, could have predicted. Samantha had always known she was meant for more than what her New York roots offered. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she never had the privileges some others did, but that didn't stop her from dreaming big. Her parents worked hard, her mother a school teacher, her father a mechanic, both doing their best to provide. Still, Samantha could never ignore the itch to break free, to step out of her surroundings and step into a life that others only read about in magazines. By the time she was in her early 20s, the busy streets of Brooklyn seemed small. After years of saving every penny she could, Samantha made the bold decision to leave the cold winters and the familiar faces of New York behind. She packed up and set her sights on Florida, Miami specifically. She was looking for luxury, prestige, and opportunity, and that's exactly what she found, albeit with hard work, sweat, and a lot of long nights. Miami's social scene was everything Samantha had dreamed of. It was glittering, fast-paced, and brimming with opportunities. But entering the world of high society wasn't easy, especially for someone without a trust fund or powerful connections. Samantha started small, working as an assistant at local events. She learned everything she could, not just about the logistics of throwing a party, but about the people behind the scenes, the real players in town. She studied their movements, their interactions, the way they carried themselves. Slowly, she built a name for herself, earning the trust of VIP clients and gaining access to the events that mattered. Samantha's reputation grew quickly in Florida's high society circles. In less than a year, she became a sought-after event planner, her name whispered in the same breath as some of Miami's top-tier planners. She was the one called to organize grand galas, charity balls, and private affairs for the elite. She managed everything with precision: flawless floral arrangements, gourmet dinners, the most exclusive venues, and all the while her ambition pushed her higher and higher. But it was at one of these exclusive events that Samantha's life took an unexpected turn. It was a high-profile charity gala, one of those rare events that only the rich and powerful attended. The glittering lights, the celebrity guests, the chatter of businessmen and diplomats. It was exactly the type of event Samantha had dreamed of organizing when she first arrived in Miami. This time, though, she wasn't behind the scenes. She was a part of the elite circle. It was here that Sheikh Abdul Bashir Fahad first noticed her. He had the kind of presence that commanded attention the moment he walked into a room. The 55-year-old billionaire real estate mogul was a figure of global power, his name tied to multi-million-dollar projects in the most coveted cities around the world. His wealth was a quiet force. He didn't need to announce it. It was felt in every room he entered. Samantha, however, wasn't intimidated by his aura of power. She noticed something else: his attention. Their first interaction was brief but magnetic. As she stood near the registration desk, organizing the evening's details, their eyes met across the room. Sheikh Abdul smiled, then approached. "I've heard much about your work, Samantha, right?" he said, his voice calm but rich with confidence. "Your reputation precedes you." The conversation continued, the words flowing easily between them, and Samantha felt an instant connection. She was drawn not only to his wealth, but to his calm, deliberate nature. Sheikh Abdul Bashir was a man of purpose, a man who calculated every step. For her, it was a moment of realization. This man was the gateway to the life she had been chasing, the life that others only dreamed about. The allure of being close to a man with such influence, such power, was undeniable. As the night progressed, they continued to talk. Abdul Bashir was intrigued by her ambition, her sharp mind, and the way she handled herself among the elite. For Samantha, his attention felt like a sign that she was finally stepping into the world she had always dreamed of. Abdul Bashir offered to meet again after the event to discuss future collaborations, but his intentions were far from professional. He was already making plans to draw her closer into his world, to control the narrative of her life as he had done with so many others. Samantha, caught in the rush of the luxury and glamour, saw this as the opportunity of a lifetime. She didn't know it yet, but she was being pulled into something much darker than she could ever imagine. The life she had dreamed of, wealth, influence, and power, was within her reach, but it would come at a cost. And Sheikh Abdul Bashir knew that he could hold her attention, could make her believe that what he offered was the key to everything she wanted. But what she didn't know was that she was about to become another pawn in his game. As the weeks went by, Abdul Bashir showered her with gifts and attention: designer jewelry, exclusive trips, and the kind of lifestyle Samantha had only ever seen in magazines. He made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. But all the while, he kept her isolated from her friends and family. As the days turned to weeks, and the weeks to months, the power dynamic between them shifted. Samantha, once the ambitious planner eager to climb the social ladder, was now caught in Abdul Bashir's web. She didn't know it yet, but her world was about to shrink. Abdul Bashir's grip on her life tightened. The once glamorous life she had envisioned was becoming something far darker. As he lavished her with luxury, he began to place demands on her, demands that she couldn't ignore. No one could know about their relationship. She could no longer publicly interact with her old friends or attend events without his approval. Abdul Bashir's world was becoming her world, and soon it would be all she knew. Samantha had become entangled in a life where every choice she made, every step she took, was controlled by the man who had promised her everything. The clock was ticking, and she was slowly losing control. Samantha didn't know it yet, but this perfect life was the beginning of a nightmare. Samantha's world seemed to shift the moment she stepped into Sheikh Abdul Bashir Fahad's life. What started as a professional connection quickly morphed into something far more intense. From the moment they locked eyes across the crowded charity gala, it was clear there was an undeniable chemistry between them. Abdul Bashir showered her with extravagant gifts, designer jewelry, luxury vacations, and exclusive invitations to the most elite events in Miami. For Samantha, it felt like a dream come true, the kind of lifestyle she had always imagined but never dared to think possible. Abdul Bashir's charm, his attention to detail, and his soft-spoken words made her feel seen in a way no one ever had. Every moment with him was a reminder of the life she had always longed for: wealth, status, and privilege. But Samantha didn't know then. The luxury and attention came at a steep price, one she would soon have no choice but to pay. As the weeks passed, Abdul Bashir's attention deepened. It was no longer just about lavish gifts or luxurious evenings at five-star restaurants. It was about control. His emotional manipulation started subtly. Samantha, once independent and self-assured, found herself more and more tangled in his web. He told her how beautiful she was, how special she was to him. He spoke in ways that made her feel like she was the center of his world. At first, it felt romantic, like every fairy tale she had ever read about. But then the strings started to pull tighter. Abdul Bashir began isolating her from the world. No more public appearances, no more casual meetings with old friends, no more going to the events she had once been so active in organizing. Samantha didn't see it at first, but little by little, she was being reduced to a private possession, one that only belonged to him. "You're too valuable to share with others," he told her during one of their private dinners. His words seemed sweet, genuine, but they were a warning. Samantha, once confident and surrounded by a large circle of friends, began to feel the weight of loneliness. She started to realize that her world was shrinking, not by her choice, but by Abdul Bashir's design. He controlled everything, from what she wore to who she spoke to. He would always be there, but only on his terms, only when he allowed it. One evening, while going through Abdul Bashir's text messages on his phone, she was organizing a business event for him, Samantha came across something that sent a chill down her spine. She saw messages exchanged between Abdul Bashir and Layla, his wife. At first, Samantha thought they might have been old messages, nothing to worry about, until she scrolled further and found something that made her heart race. A message from Layla. "I know about her. Be careful, Abdul Bashir. Don't let this get out of hand." Samantha froze, her blood running cold. She had suspected something wasn't right, but this was proof. Layla knew about the affair. The perfect image of a loving family, a well-maintained public facade, was nothing more than a mask. Samantha's world flipped upside down. She wasn't the only woman in Abdul Bashir's life, and worse yet, Layla had known about her from the start. Her mind raced, and a sinking feeling settled in her stomach. She was trapped, not just in the relationship, but in the illusion of it all. Layla's message had made it clear. Sheikh Abdul was playing both women against each other, using them to feed his need for control. And Samantha had become another pawn in a game where the rules were designed to keep her locked in. The discovery set off a chain of events. Samantha, still blinded by the luxury and promises Abdul Bashir had given her, confronted him. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mixture of hurt and anger. "Why are you keeping me in the dark?" His response was cold, calculated. "You knew what this was, Samantha. This is about us, not anyone else." His words were sharp, designed to shut her down, to make her feel foolish for questioning him. She felt small, insignificant, like everything she had once dreamed about was now slipping through her fingers. He tightened his grip once again, dismissing her feelings as if they didn't matter. "Don't concern yourself with her. Focus on what's here, with me," he said, his words dripping with authority. But that's when Samantha began to realize something terrifying. She was no longer living the dream. She was now caught in his game of emotional manipulation, playing by his rules, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. The more she tried to push back, the tighter his grip became. Every move she made was scrutinized, every word twisted to fit his narrative. He turned her love for him into fear, his kindness into control. The more she thought about it, the more isolated she became. Samantha began to question whether the luxury she was living was worth the emotional cost. She couldn't leave. Abdul Bashir had made sure of that. Every time she tried to reach out to her old life, she was met with more pushback. He'd show up unannounced at her apartment just to remind her that he could, that she was still his. "You don't need them, Samantha. You have me," he'd tell her, wrapping her in his arms, as though his presence was all she'd ever need. But the reality of it gnawed at her. His promises of a better life had turned into a cage, and she couldn't see a way out. Then the tension reached its peak. Layla, the wife who had known about the affair all along, was becoming more aggressive in her threats. Her messages to Samantha grew darker and more direct. "You're just a distraction," Layla had written. "He will never leave me, no matter what you do." The weight of those words hit Samantha like a ton of bricks. Abdul Bashir wasn't just using her. He was using both women to fuel his own desire for dominance, for control, for power, and in doing so, he had trapped them both. The relationship that Samantha had once seen as her ticket to the life of luxury now felt like a nightmare she couldn't escape. The walls were closing in, and the power that Abdul Bashir held over her was suffocating her. It was at that moment that Samantha realized the truth. She had become just another woman trapped in the web of a man who would stop at nothing to keep her under his control. The glamour, the gifts, the promises of a better life, it had all been an illusion, designed to keep her exactly where he wanted her, isolated, controlled, and ultimately trapped. And in the darkness of that realization, Samantha's world began to crack, leaving her wondering if the man she had fallen for was capable of much darker things than she had ever imagined. Before we continue, I just want to say, if you're still here listening to this story, thank you. This is a new channel, and honestly, every view, every subscription means everything. It tells me their stories matter to you the way they matter to me. So if you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, all right? Let's get back to it. Life inside the penthouse at Dunnaview Towers felt like living inside a dream that quickly turned into a nightmare. The high-rise apartment, once a symbol of everything Samantha had worked for, now served as a gilded cage. She had once imagined it as the ultimate reward, the final stop in her journey toward wealth and success. The view of Miami's sparkling skyline from the penthouse windows had once filled her with awe and excitement. Now each glance out those windows felt like a reminder of how far she had fallen. The golden furnishings, the imported Italian leather sofas, and the sparkling crystal chandeliers no longer felt luxurious. They felt cold, as if each piece was designed to keep her trapped in a world that no longer belonged to her. Sheikh Abdul Bashir's presence in the apartment had always been domineering, but it had escalated over time. He was no longer just a powerful figure in her life. He had become her world. Every aspect of her daily routine, from what she wore to where she went, was tightly controlled by him. He would show up unexpectedly, keeping her on edge, watching her every move. She was no longer allowed to go out alone. She wasn't even allowed to see her old friends or family. Samantha tried to fight it at first, texting her friends, asking for a break, trying to make plans to get out, but the messages went unanswered. He had effectively isolated her from the world outside the penthouse. She felt alone, the walls closing in around her. Every time she tried to reach out, she was reminded that she no longer had any freedom. She belonged to him. He had created an environment where every decision was his to make. Samantha would wake up to find her phone locked and her social media accounts monitored. Layla, Sheikh Abdul Bashir's wife, became a silent force in the background, often sending cryptic messages, threats wrapped in passive aggression. "I know who you are," one message from Layla read. "Don't get too comfortable. This will end badly for you." At first, Samantha tried to brush it off, telling herself that Layla's jealousy was just a passing emotion. But it soon became clear that these weren't random threats. Layla knew everything. The phone calls she couldn't answer, the invitations she couldn't accept, and the friends she couldn't see were all part of a strategy to break her down, to make her feel like she was nothing without Abdul Bashir. It wasn't just the isolation, it was the psychological toll. When Samantha asked Abdul Bashir about the future, about his true feelings for her, his answers were always vague, dismissive. He'd tell her she was too emotional, or that she needed to focus on their future together. But it felt more like he was placating her, trying to quiet her fears without ever addressing them. Every time she pressed him for answers, he would grow cold, silent, and distant. "You don't need to ask those questions," he'd say, his voice filled with a cold finality. "Trust me." The more she stayed in that penthouse, the more she realized that she was becoming a prisoner in a life that once seemed like paradise. The luxury that once brought her joy now felt like a chain. Samantha had dreamed of this life for so long, But now that she had it, she couldn't escape the suffocating weight of Sheikh Abdul Bashir's control. She could feel herself diminishing every day, her sense of self being swallowed by the walls of the penthouse, by the ever-present gaze of Abdul Bashir and Layla. The tension reached its breaking point when, one night, Samantha found a message from Layla that sent a chill through her entire body. "You'll never be good enough for him." Layla's words were simple, but they carried a venom that cut deeper than any physical wound. Samantha knew without a doubt that Layla had been watching her closely. She had become a pawn in their game, one that he could use whenever he felt like it, and one that Layla was determined to break. The thought of Abdul Bashir playing both sides, one with his wife and the other with her, made Samantha feel like an object rather than a woman. She was living in a luxury that had been designed to keep her locked in place, controlled by a man who promised her everything, but gave her nothing in return. She was nothing more than an illusion of his affection, a woman caught between two worlds, both of which wanted to consume her. Finally, Samantha reached a point where she could no longer tolerate the mental prison that Sheikh Abdul had built for her. She needed answers. She had to confront him face to face about the life they were leading. It was the only way to free herself from the isolation she had come to resent. So one evening, she called him into the penthouse living room, her heart racing as she prepared for the confrontation. "Abdul Bashir, I can't keep living like this," Samantha said, trying to hold her ground. "What are we doing here? What is this thing between us? I need to know the truth. Am I just another woman to you?" Her voice trembled, but she had to ask. She couldn't stay trapped in his web any longer. Abdul Bashir stood there for a moment, his expression unreadable, before he finally spoke. "You think too much, Samantha. You're not seeing the bigger picture. You're here with me. That's what matters. Everything else is just noise. You'll see soon enough." His words were dismissive, as if the questions she was asking didn't even matter. He refused to acknowledge her feelings, his eyes cold and unwavering. Samantha had always believed that if she could earn his love, if she could just prove that she was worthy of him, then things would change. But now, standing in front of him, she saw the truth. She had never been anything more than his possession. "You're right," she whispered, a mix of frustration and realization flooding her. "I'm done." She could feel the weight of those words as soon as they left her lips. She was done. Done with the lies. Done with the manipulation. Done with the illusion of love that Abdul Bashir had built around her. But just as quickly as the words left her mouth, a feeling of dread settled over her. She wasn't sure what would happen next. Would he allow her to walk away? Would the power he had over her life finally break? As Abdul Bashir turned his back to her, walking toward the door without a word, Samantha stood frozen. What she didn't know then was that walking away from him would be the hardest thing she would ever do, and the most dangerous. Abdul Bashir wasn't going to let her go, not without a fight, and that fight would change everything. The night was supposed to be a break, a rare opportunity for Samantha Ellis and Sheikh Abdul Bashir Fahad to unwind after the exhausting days of their entangled lives. It had been weeks since their last genuine moment of peace. Samantha had begun to feel the weight of the life Abdul Bashir had crafted for her, and tonight she hoped it would be different. After all, the penthouse at Dunnaview Towers was still stunning. The kind of luxury that could take her breath away on any given day. But tonight it felt empty. The golden edges of the apartment, the rich textures of the furniture, the soft glow of the lights, they seemed to mock her. Abdul Bashir had insisted on a movie night, something calm, something casual. He suggested watching old classics, their usual way to connect. The evening began like so many others had. Samantha on the couch, Abdul Bashir pouring them 2 glasses of champagne, a slight smile playing on his lips as he sat next to her, a comforting presence in the room. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but Samantha had been feeling something deeper for a while now. The perfect facade had begun to crack. As the movie played, Samantha sat rigid, the tension building in her chest. It wasn't just the images on the screen, it was everything around her, everything she had come to realize about Abdul Bashir. The luxury, the attention, the gifts. It had all been part of his plan. She had started to feel suffocated, like a prisoner in a life she had worked so hard to attain. It wasn't just the isolation, it was the emotional manipulation, the constant control. She had stopped seeing her friends and family visits were out of the question. The phone calls she made were always monitored, her every step scrutinized. She was no longer the ambitious woman who had dreamed of success. She had become his possession. As the night went on, Samantha's thoughts grew louder. She had to confront him. She couldn't keep pretending anymore. She had thought about it for days, rehearsed it in her mind. What would she say? How would she say it? Tonight she would demand answers. Her gaze shifted toward Abdul Bashir, who seemed content in his own world, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing within her. She was ready, or at least she convinced herself she was. Abdul Bashir, we need to talk. Samantha's voice broke the silence. Her words seemed to freeze the air between them. He looked at her, the glass in his hand, his face unreadable. What's wrong? He asked, his voice smooth, calm, but she could hear the undertone of something deeper, something that always lurked beneath his facade. She wasn't sure what he was hiding, but she was determined to find out. I can't keep doing this, Samantha said, her eyes narrowing. I can't keep living in this world you built for me. You've promised me everything, but what's the cost? I can't be your secret anymore. I deserve to know the truth about you. I deserve to know who I really am to you. Abdul Bashir's face hardened. His eyes shifted slightly, but his composure never wavered. Samantha, you don't understand. This is about us. It's always been about us. You don't need to concern yourself with anything else. Her chest tightened as she struggled to hold back the growing storm within her. No, you're wrong. I need to know. You're married. Layla knows about us, doesn't she? I saw the messages. I know everything. Why didn't you tell me? The words came out in a rush, each one more painful than the last. The silence that followed was suffocating. Abdul Bashir's grip on his glass tightened, his face shifting into something colder. He put the glass down carefully, his gaze never leaving hers. You knew what this was, Samantha. I never promised you anything other than what I've already given you. The life, the luxury, the success. That's what you wanted, isn't it? Everything you dreamed of. You didn't want my truth. You wanted my world. Samantha's heart raced. She stood up, the tension in her body becoming unbearable. I didn't want your world. I wanted you to be honest with me. I didn't ask for this. I didn't sign up for this. You've kept me in the dark, kept me hidden, and I've done nothing but play along. Her voice cracked, the frustration spilling out. I'm not your plaything, Abdul Bashir. I'm not your toy to use when it's convenient for you. I'm done being treated like I don't matter. I deserve more. Abdul Bashir's expression remained cold, but something in his eyes flashed, something darker, more dangerous. For a moment, there was a flicker of resentment, something deep and calculating. You're asking for too much, he said, his voice low. You've always been too demanding, Samantha. You need to accept your place. You wanted this life. Now you have it. What more do you want? The words hit her like a slap. She had finally confronted him, but all she saw was a man who had no intention of letting go of his grip on her. His arrogance stung more than anything. He believed he could control everything, her life, her future, even her love for him. He had built her up only to tear her down, to make her feel like she couldn't survive without him. I want to leave. Samantha's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the tension like a knife. I want to walk away from this, from you. I can't keep living like this under your control. I won't. The room seemed to grow smaller. The penthouse, once a symbol of everything she had wanted, now felt like a prison. The luxury she had once craved now felt suffocating. Samantha had finally found the courage to leave, to step out of the life that Abdul Bashir had built around her. But Abdul Bashir wasn't ready to let her go. Not yet, not after everything he had built. His control was absolute, and he would not let her break free so easily. His hands reached out to grab her once more. But this time, Samantha pushed him away, harder than she ever had before. Let go of me, she shouted, her hands trembling. But as her push collided with his chest, The tension between them snapped. He didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed her again, this time more forcefully. His hands were around her neck, tightening. Samantha gasped for air, her vision blurring, her body desperate to break free. This wasn't just anger, it was power, a desire to dominate. She had finally done it. She had pushed him to the edge. But in doing so, she had unleashed something in him that no one had ever seen before. With cold precision, Abdul Bashir tightened his grip, each second feeling like an eternity. His control over her was now complete. She had no way out. Her world was over. Before we continue, I just want to say, if you're still here listening to this story, thank you. This is a new channel. And honestly, every view, every subscription means everything. It tells me their stories matter to you, the way they matter to me. So if you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. All right, let's get back to it. With cold precision, Abdul Bashir tightened his grip, each second feeling like an eternity. Samantha gasped, her chest tightening, her fingers clawing at his hands, desperate to break free. There was no room to breathe, no room to think. Every inch of her body screamed for escape, but Abdul Bashir's strength was overwhelming. His calm demeanor, once a sign of control, now bordered on terrifying. He wasn't just holding her in place, he was subduing her, breaking her will with the coldness of his grip. Samantha's world, the luxury, the dream life she thought she had built, crumbled in those moments. Her escape, her one hope of freedom, was slipping away, and all she could do was struggle against him, every movement growing weaker as the seconds ticked by. Her vision began to blur. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she slowly felt herself losing consciousness. It was then that she realized she wasn't going to make it out. Abdul Bashir's grip tightened even more, slowly but surely extinguishing her hope for any future. Her body went limp, her final breath escaping her as the darkness took over. As she lay there, her life slipping away in the man's hands who had promised her everything, the penthouse around them felt eerily silent. The world outside went on, unaware of the violence, the power that had just sealed her fate. The call came in at 6:42 a.m. The concierge at Dunaview Towers, the luxury apartment complex where Sheikh Abdul Bashir Fahad resided, was shaken and frantic as he spoke to the dispatcher. His voice cracked with panic as he reported an urgent incident at the penthouse. It wasn't the usual request for maintenance or room service that the security team was accustomed to. It was something far more disturbing. A body had been found, and it wasn't just any body. The concierge's words were clear. It's her. It's the woman. The one who's been living here. She's in the fridge. She's dismembered. The dispatcher, still processing the initial shock, immediately alerted local law enforcement. Within minutes, Miami-Dade police officers were en route to the building. The situation was unfolding fast, but there were many unanswered questions. Why had no one alerted the authorities sooner? Samantha Ellis had been living in the penthouse for months, yet no one had raised suspicion until now. Why was the concierge, who had to know the residents personally, suddenly calling in such an alarming report? The tension in the building was growing, and with every passing moment, the truth about Samantha's death was beginning to take shape. When the officers arrived at the penthouse, they were met with an unsettling stillness. The building's security team had already cleared the entrance, allowing them to go straight to the scene. Detective Rachel Hayes, a seasoned investigator with Miami PD, was among the first to enter the penthouse. The scene was as chilling as it was surreal. The luxurious setting, the soft lighting, the sleek, modern furniture, it all stood in stark contrast to the horrific crime that had taken place. Rachel's sharp eyes immediately went to the refrigerator. It had been left ajar. Inside, Samantha's dismembered body was concealed. But what shocked Rachel wasn't just the brutality of the act. It was the methodical nature of it. There was little blood on the floor. The fridge doors weren't forced open in haste. They were carefully pulled open, as if the killer had taken his time. No signs of a struggle were found in the living room, making it even harder to believe that the crime had happened on impulse. This wasn't an act of passion. This was a planned murder. Someone had controlled the scene, and everything about it pointed to one man, Abdulbashir Fahat. Rachel walked around the penthouse with slow, deliberate steps, taking in every detail. The more she observed, the clearer it became that this wasn't an isolated crime. There was a pattern, a web of control surrounding Samantha, one that had been there from the very beginning. She started her investigation by questioning the concierge who had come across the body. "When was the last time you saw Miss Ellis?" Rachel asked, her voice calm but sharp. The concierge, visibly shaken, struggled to find the right words. "It was last night. She was alone. I saw her entering the building after midnight, like usual, but I hadn't seen her leave this morning. I went to check when we noticed something wrong." Rachel asked, "Why didn't you call the police sooner?" The concierge hesitated. I thought it was a mistake. I didn't realize what had happened until I opened the refrigerator." His voice trailed off as he visibly recoiled at the memory. "I should have acted faster." The fact that the concierge hadn't raised the alarm earlier seemed strange to Rachel, but it wasn't immediately clear why. She moved to question the building staff. After a series of interviews, she began to piece together a disturbing reality. The staff, it seemed, had been intimidated by Abdul Bashir's presence in the building. No one questioned him. No one asked about Samantha's whereabouts or her relationship with the sheikh. Abdul Bashir had made it clear that his affairs were his own business, and for someone with his wealth and power, the staff had learned to turn a blind eye to anything that might rock the boat. Rachel wasn't naive. She knew that Abdul Bashir's status, his connections, could make this investigation a lot more difficult. It was clear now that this case was no longer just a domestic incident. It was much bigger. Rachel suspected that Abdul Bashir's involvement would be met with resistance, and she was prepared for it. He had too many connections, too many resources at his disposal. But the truth had to come out. The investigation quickly escalated as Rachel dug into Abdul Bashir's background. She discovered a series of unsettling patterns in his past relationships. Abdul Bashir wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He had a history of controlling and manipulating the women in his life. There were whispers of affairs that ended badly, women who disappeared from the social scene after becoming involved with him. Rachel didn't have all the details yet, but she knew that Abdul Bashir's past was far from clean. Meanwhile, as the investigation continued, Rachel reached out to Samantha's family. They had no idea what had been happening in her life in the months leading up to her death. In a series of tense interviews, Samantha's mother, Martha Ellis, spoke about the last time she spoke with her daughter. "She'd been distant," Martha said, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I could hear it in her voice, but she always brushed it off, saying she was fine. I never met him. She never told me much about Abdul Bashir, just that he was someone powerful. I didn't know he was controlling her like this." Nicole Harris, Samantha's best friend, added, "Samantha always told me she was happy, but she started pulling away. She'd cancel plans, stop answering my calls. I didn't know what to think, but I could tell something wasn't right. Now it all makes sense. She was trapped." The pieces were starting to come together, but Rachel needed more than just the emotional accounts from Samantha's family and friends. She needed hard evidence. Rachel's next move was to obtain Samantha's phone. After a thorough examination of the messages, she found a pattern of threatening texts from Layla Fahat, Abdul Bashir's wife. The messages were chilling. "You are nothing but a distraction. Stay out of my marriage, or I'll make sure you regret it," one message read. Another one warned, "You'll never have him. He belongs to me, and you'll pay the price." These messages didn't just point to a jealous wife. They pointed to dangerous manipulation from both Abdul Bashir and Layla. Samantha had been trapped between two powerful forces, a man who could control her every move, and a woman determined to keep her in her place. But there was something even darker brewing beneath the surface. Abdul Bashir had made it clear that he had no intention of letting Samantha leave him. He had told her she was nothing but a distraction, someone to be disposed of when she no longer served his needs. Rachel knew the stakes were higher than ever. Abdul Bashir had already shown how far he was willing to go to maintain control, but now the world would know the truth. With every step, Rachel's determination grew. She was fighting not just for justice, but for the truth, the truth that no amount of money, power, or influence could hide. The atmosphere in the Miami courtroom was charged with anticipation as the trial of Sheikh Abdul Bashir Fahad began. It was a spectacle, a clash of wealth and power against truth and justice. For weeks, the media had been covering the case, with headlines blaring the shocking details of Samantha Ellis's brutal murder. Abdul Bashir, once a respected businessman, was now a defendant in a high-profile case that had captured the attention of the world. His calm, almost serene demeanor in the courtroom was a stark contrast to the grisly details of Samantha's death. The public watched closely, eager to see how the legal system would handle a case involving such a powerful man. Rachel Hayes sat in the back of the courtroom, watching intently as the trial unfolded. This wasn't just another case for her. It was the culmination of months of investigation, of fighting through political pressure and powerful adversaries to get to the truth. The sheikh had already shown how far he was willing to go to maintain his control, but now the world was watching. There would be no escape for him, not this time. Rachel's determination was palpable. This trial wasn't just about a single woman's life. It was about fighting back against a man who had used his wealth and influence to manipulate and dominate those around him. It was about justice, and nothing could stop Rachel now. The prosecution made its opening statement. Samantha Hill, the lead prosecutor, stood tall and confidently addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "what we have here is a man who exploited, manipulated, and ultimately destroyed a young woman who had dreams, who had ambitions. He lured her into his world of luxury and power, but it wasn't just about money. It was about control. He knew exactly what he was doing when he manipulated Samantha into believing she could live a life of affluence with him. But when she tried to break free, when she started to see the truth, he did the only thing he could do to keep her under his thumb. He killed her." As Hill spoke, she laid out the case against Abdul Bashir Fahad. The manipulation, the psychological warfare he had waged against Samantha, and the evidence that pointed directly to him as the architect of her death. The forensic evidence was damning. Samantha's body had been dismembered with cold precision, her remains hidden in the refrigerator. A clear indication that this was no crime of passion, but a calculated act of murder. The dismemberment itself had taken time, effort, and an unmistakable lack of remorse. Abdul Bashir, however, remained unfazed. He sat in his chair stoic, his hands folded in front of him. His lawyer, Gerald Thompson, stood up to give the defense's opening statement. "This is a tragedy, yes. But what we are not hearing is the full picture. My client, Sheikh Abdul Bashir Fahad, did not kill Samantha Ellis. What happened that night was a tragic accident. Samantha was emotionally unstable, suffering from anxiety, paranoia, and distress from her personal life. The evidence shows that she was out of control, and my client acted in self-defense when she became violent. He had no choice but to defend himself." Thompson's argument seemed rehearsed, crafted to portray Abdul Bashir as a victim of a woman who had lost control. The defense would argue that the sheikh had been forced into a position where he had to protect himself. They painted Samantha as a mentally unstable woman whose behavior had grown increasingly erratic as the affair progressed. Thompson even went so far as to claim that Samantha's history of emotional instability had been the true cause of the violence that occurred that night. But the prosecution wasn't buying it. Samantha Hill quickly tore into the defense's narrative, pointing out the lack of evidence for any claims of self-defense. If this was truly a case of self-defense, then why was Samantha's body hidden in the refrigerator? Why was there no sign of struggle in the living room? "Why didn't Abdul Bashir call for help immediately?" Hill asked, looking directly at the jury. "This wasn't self-defense. This was a man who knew he had the power to get away with it, and so he did. He killed Samantha because he wanted to maintain his control over her life. And now, it's time for us to make sure that control doesn't extend beyond this courtroom." As the trial continued, the witnesses began to take the stand. First, it was Samantha's family. Martha Ellis, Samantha's mother, gave an emotional testimony. "My daughter was a strong, ambitious woman. She wanted to make a difference, and she wanted to be successful, but she didn't deserve what happened to her. She didn't deserve to be manipulated and trapped by someone who claimed to love her. Samantha's best friend, Nicole Harris, spoke next. Her voice broke as she described the last time she saw Samantha. She seemed like she was pulling away from everything. She told me she was busy with work, but I knew it was more than that. She wasn't the same person I had known. She was trapped, and I didn't know how to help her. Each of their testimonies painted a picture of a woman who had been controlled and manipulated by Abdul Bashir. They described the isolation Samantha had faced, the emotional toll the relationship had taken on her, and how she had slowly lost the life she had once dreamed of. The prosecution also presented new forensic evidence that painted a clearer picture of the premeditated nature of the murder. The medical examiner testified that the dismemberment had been done with extreme care and precision, not something done in a fit of rage, but something that required thought and planning. The injuries to Samantha's body indicated that Abdul Bashir had been in complete control during the act of dismemberment. He wasn't reacting to a threat. He was controlling the situation, eliminating a woman who had threatened to escape his web of control. Through it all, Abdul Bashir's demeanor never changed. His calm, collected presence was a stark contrast to the mounting evidence against him. But his composure worked in his favor. His ability to manipulate public perception was clear. He was a charismatic figure, known for his philanthropic work, a man who was used to being in the spotlight. In the courtroom, he was no different. He watched as testimony after testimony painted him as the villain, yet he never flinched. His presence in the courtroom was almost transcendent, as if he believed his wealth and influence could erase the truth. But Rachel Hayes knew better. She knew this trial was the fight of her life. As the days passed, the case became more than just about Samantha. It was about the powerful man who thought he could escape justice, about a system that had allowed him to remain untouchable for so long. The trial wasn't just a battle for Samantha's memory, it was a battle for truth, and Rachel wasn't backing down. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The jury had already heard the testimonies, reviewed the evidence, and sat through the arguments from both sides. What had begun as a trial about a powerful, wealthy man accused of murder had become something much bigger. A battle for accountability in a world where money and influence often erased the lines of justice. Sheikh Abdul Bashir Fahad had used every resource at his disposal to defend himself, relying on his family's wealth and their connections to manipulate the narrative. But there was one thing he had overlooked: the truth. In the final days of the trial, new shocking revelations had surfaced, further unraveling Abdul Bashir's carefully constructed facade. It had become undeniable. He had used his power to control Samantha Ellis, to isolate her, and when she dared to escape, he killed her. The investigation, spearheaded by Detective Rachel Hayes, had exposed the darkness hiding behind Abdul Bashir's public image. It wasn't just the affair. The dismemberment of Samantha's body in the refrigerator proved it was all about control. It was a cold, calculated murder, meant to silence her, meant to remind anyone else who might dare challenge him of the lengths he would go to. But it wasn't just the evidence that had broken Abdul Bashir's defense. As the trial neared its conclusion, Rachel Hayes had discovered something that would tilt the balance in favor of justice. The deleted phone records, the anonymous threatening messages from Layla Fahad, Abdul Bashir's wife, and the security footage that had been covered up, all of it pointed to a long-standing history of control, manipulation, and coercion. And this time, money and power couldn't cover up the truth. The jury filed back into the courtroom after hours of deliberation. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the foreman stood, holding the final verdict. Abdul Bashir's lawyers exchanged worried glances, but their client maintained his typical calm, a cold, almost smug expression on his face. He had weathered the storm so far, he was used to being untouchable. The foreman of the jury stood, his voice echoing through the silence. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Sheikh Abdul Bashir Fahad, guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Samantha Ellis." The words landed like a thunderclap, shattering the quiet of the room. The audience, the reporters, the lawyers, the onlookers, were momentarily stunned. Samantha's family could hardly contain their emotions as the jury's decision sunk in. Justice, at long last, had been served. Sheikh Abdul Bashir's expression remained unchanged, but the shock was clear. For a moment, he seemed to brace himself for the inevitable. He had lived a life of absolute control, surrounded by wealth and influence, and for the first time, those forces had been rendered powerless. He was no longer the untouchable man who could manipulate every situation in his favor. The truth had caught up with him, and now the world would know exactly who he was. The judge, after confirming the verdict, issued the sentence. Sheikh Abdul Bashir Fahad, you have been found guilty of first-degree murder, and I hereby sentence you to 30 years in prison with no possibility of parole. The audience let out a collective breath, a moment of relief rippling through the room. For months, Sheikh Abdul Bashir's empire had tried to bend the legal system, to use its wealth and political power to avoid accountability, but now the final blow had been struck. No amount of money, influence, or connections could save him from the truth. He was finally held accountable for the life he had taken. Samantha Ellis, a woman who had been manipulated, controlled, and ultimately silenced in the most brutal way imaginable. As Abdul Bashir was escorted out of the courtroom, his once imposing presence now a shadow of what it had been, Rachel Hayes allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. Justice had prevailed, and Samantha's family would finally have the closure they deserved. The fight wasn't over yet, but this was a major victory. Samantha was more than just a victim. She was a symbol of how far the legal system was willing to go to right the wrongs of the powerful and the wealthy. Layla Fahad, Abdul Bashir's wife, had been complicit, though the extent of her involvement in the murder was still unclear. The evidence against her had been circumstantial, but it was evident that she had played a significant role in enabling her husband's manipulation and control. The case was far from over, but the courtroom verdict against Abdul Bashir had sent a clear message. No one, no matter how powerful, was above the law. The trial had concluded with a powerful victory for justice, but the legal battle didn't end there. Abdul Bashir's family and powerful associates in Dubai were not about to let this defeat slide. As the trial ended, whispers circulated of plans to overturn the verdict, using their immense wealth to apply pressure on the legal system. The Dubai embassy had already made inquiries, and the threat of a diplomatic intervention hung heavy in the air. Would Abdul Bashir's family succeed in bending the law once again? Or would justice stand firm, even against the richest, most powerful forces? The final battle for Samantha's justice was not over yet. Thank you for sticking through this incredible journey. What do you think? Is justice truly served, or is there more to this story than meets the eye? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And if you found this video gripping, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more true crime stories, and share this with your friends. We're building a community, and your voice matters. Oh, and drop the city where you're watching from. I'm curious to see how far this story reaches, and I'm reading all comment. Thank you.